Hey, what's up, guys? Merry Christmas Eve, and today we're going to take a look at how to drop the bass in Logic, which is basically a horrible video title for a video where I just go through how I kind of made a drop. So this is what we're going to make. Sorry, not that sound. And this is just something that I'm working on for myself. It's a work in progress right now, but I know a lot of you are like, how do you make something that's kind of complex? I just use one wobble that I learned on YouTube and kind of take it all the way through, but I'm going to show you how you can make something that sounds kind of cool, and you don't have to be you don't have to be a master, you don't have to be someone who's amazing at mixing to make something that sounds pretty good. So how I started out with this is I had just did the rest of my song, my intro, my build up, so I was, and then I had nothing. So I said, all right, what I'll do is I'll just make maybe like 5 instrument tracks. I just went up here, new tracks, added 5 instrument tracks, and then I just made different types of sounds, but they're all like a single hit. So this is the first sound that I made, and I just put it at the beginning. You can really just make a sound and then put it in for a short, like a single hit. So it was just that's what I made, and then I said, all right, maybe I'll need a higher pitch sound to move to in the next one. So again, these are just random massive patches that I'm making. Really, if you don't make a great sound every time, that's the great sound is not really what's important. It's kind of how you put them together. So I just said maybe I'd like to go to a higher note, and this is where you make your song. What are you going to move to? How are you going to move to it? So this is what I had. That's what I came up with, and I just kept adding more kind of single hit sounds. Don't make really long sounds. Just say, if I'm going to hit this for like an eighth note or a quarter note, how's it going to sound when I put it together? So then I added one more, and you can see that those are just three kind of one hits, and they're all, if you've noticed, they have a ton of processing on them, but they are all just massive patches. I thought this one kind of sounded like what iFi did before they had the whole breakup thing. I don't know what that was, but it's just one oscillator. Like these are easy massive patches to make. And then if you haven't used in Logic the phase distortion, you should start using that, because that can take kind of a really lame sound and make it cool. It changes the character of sounds a lot. So I use that on most everything if I don't like the way it sounds when I first make it. So that's how I started out. I'm just making kind of single hits and putting them in sequence with each other. What did I have next? These two I didn't even make in this session. They're from another song that I'm working on that's unreleased. These are a bit harder to make, but that's not really important. You can make sounds that you can use just like I made the other two. See, and when you make these kind of single hit bass sounds, you're going to notice that there's a lot of gaps, and that's good. See, if you listen to it again, because I'm only putting them in for a very short duration. And when you hear those gaps, kind of when you're making the song, you'll know where you can put in other sounds, and then you just kind of add them in. You make a new sound, and then you add it in. See, just wherever that break was, I took a new massive patch, made a massive patch, put it in. And then I decided to change it up a little bit in the second part with a longer sound, which will sound good because you spent the first part of the drop just only using short sounds. And I layered that. A lot of times when you're making kind of bigger bass sounds that aren't these short hits that you're playing only for a short time, you want to make sure that they sound big. So this one, if I go ahead and get rid of these, this is what that sound, it's actually two sounds. That's what it sounds like. Wow, I have something else. Oh yeah. But I believe this one is just filling out the low end. And to make this, I think I actually just I duplicated this track with this one here, this button, and I just changed the patch a little bit, cut some of the highs, and then layered it. It sounded nice. What else did I do? What does this sound like? Here, again, I layered the sound to give it a little bit different character. I think when you're making your bass drops, if you don't want to sound really generic, you have to sometimes give up making the sound that you want and make a sound that has some character to it. So, like, I think this sound is an example of a sound that has character to it, and that's why I named it Panda Eyes, because a lot of his, if you listen to his stuff, it's all great, and all of his synths really have some character to them. They're not kind of basic wob wob, everyone sounds the same kind of thing. Every song he makes, he's got stuff that sounds unique, so like that's kind of not a sound that, not a, like the other ones I used are all pretty generic, like low. Like, I bet no one's ever heard this sound up here before, although it is a very nice sound. I do like it. I spent a lot of time making this. I can show you the basic massive patch for that if you would like, and you can use it. Of course, there's a lot of processing on here, you can see that, but I don't want to show you that because I want you to kind of maybe take this and do with it what you will. Still, only one oscillator. I must like AI. I use it a lot. I'll show you LFO. Nothing really complicated. I have a P shaper on it. Some distortion. It's the envelope. Looks like I didn't even change that. Wow, this is a very basic sound. But again, that's just showing you, if you take something like this, it probably took me a couple minutes at Massive, and then you just add a ton of stuff on it. On another note, Camel Crusher, you should get this. It's a very good distortion plugin that is also free, and I don't like to pirate plugins really, and I don't like to pay for plugins, so I get free plugins. I like it. It can be a little bit intense sometimes, but it does the job. I want to listen to how this sounds. That's without. That's with. I think maybe it's not doing so much because I'm cutting a lot of things. But yeah, so basically, when you're making a drop and you're not amazing, you want to basically take short bass hits and then put them together, because and also on another note, you want to keep everything the same note. So I think all of the hits in the first 8 bars are an A note. Okay, basically that entire thing is A and G. There's like 4 G notes and everything else is A. So you don't have to be making a ton of melodies in your drops. That's for earlier. You should kind of fit that in the intro, and then in the drops you want to just, if you're doing this kind of style where you're doing short hits, keep those all the same note. Otherwise it's going to sound funky, and it's going to sound good even if you are playing the same note, because you're doing it with different timbres. You're playing different sounds. And then from there, when you go out of the drop. I just think this is important, so I'm going to say. I'm going to work on that a bit more right now, but you'll see that you don't want to just go into silence. You want to keep kind of some of the same elements that you have in the drop and then continue them and maybe add something else that's a little bit new. You don't just want to put in a white sweep and go to silence until you go to the next section. It's just something I thought I'd add in. Well, obviously there's a lot more in the drop than just the bass sounds. If you want to make it sound better, sound a little bit more crisp, you want to have all your hi-hats and crashes in there. That's a given. I had some choir thingies going on. Put some reverb on those. This is more choir stuff, I believe. And it sounds kind of annoying by itself, but it's kind of filling out the upper end, which is lacking, of course, when you're just putting in a ton of lower frequency sounds. I've got some chords filling it out a little bit more. So maybe listen for those if I play. You can hear those in the back, and if those are really filling out the drop, so you should make sure that, as always, you're taking your sounds and you're filling up the whole frequency spectrum. So you make your bass sounds and you say, this doesn't sound crisp, it doesn't sound like it's filling kind of the mid to highs, and then you got to add stuff like that. If you want to be lazy like me, you can just add in kind of hit them every fourth note like that. What is that even called? I have to do more music theory, quarter notes. Shame on me, I played piano for 10 years. I don't know what that is. Yeah, it's a quarter note. When you're leading into the drop, that's actually a big thing too. If you want your drops to sound big, you have to have a good lead in. I'm probably going to add some kind of vocal sample or tom fill there, but as I go into the drop, you hear that, and that actually makes a big difference. I think that's just this. Maybe I have it a couple places. Just take a symbol you've been using in your song, reverse it, and then go into kind of your white noise in the beginning of the drop. You always want to have white noise stuff in the beginning of the drop, just as a general rule. If I take all that stuff out, kind of like my down transition, it's going to sound a little bit worse. It sounds kind of abrupt, but if you add that back in, even though you can't really hear it so much, you're going to notice the difference. So that is something that you always want to do, really in any type of electronic music. When you're making a drop, you want to put that in. Otherwise, it's gonna sound like a funky transition. Not a good funky transition, a bad funky transition. Trying to think if there's anything else for the drop. Why do I have this muted? This is just some more white noise. And I so happen to transition every 8 bars. That's what I want to talk about. You're free to do what you want, be creative, but if you're making music that you want people to be able to DJ, and that's kind of music that gets played in clubs, you need to make sure that you are not transitioning things at 6 bars. 1, because it will sound weird, and 2, because that is not how DJing works. You don't transition at 6 bars. So do everything in 8 bars. You can switch it up a little bit at 4 bars, but when you're doing kind of big style changes, you want to do every 8 bars. Like here, I've got 8 bars in the intro. And then I switch to for 8 bars, then I have a breakdown. and then the drop. So you want to make sure that you're doing that, and honestly, you don't always have to do that, but if you choose not to do it in terms of 8 bars, make sure it doesn't sound weird. You'll definitely be able to hear when you're not doing something right with that. If you have any kind of inclination for musicality, which I hope you do. It's not just all about making noises on the computer. Anything else? Maybe I'll give you guys a couple more massive patches. Because it's Christmas. I feel like giving. What is this? I'll give you a good one. I don't know if you want that one there. Sure, you want to see. That one sounds kind of gritty. I'll show you that one. This one's a little bit more complicated. But basically, only the first oscillator is doing anything. So if you're lazy and you want to make the sound different than the way I have it, just get the first oscillator to sound like this. Which is basically, that's like the base of the sound. These just add a little bit of grit. So, I got those. You can see all that. I'm putting all that into LFO 5. Where's that? Stop. I don't need to update. LFO 5. The 1 over 16, that's why you hear the double hit when I play that. This is interesting. I put that at 7. I'm not sure what that's called, but I know that's some kind of musical interval, and it sounds good, so I used it. Gives the sound a little bit more character, like I said earlier. I'm trying to see if there's anything weird on this. 2 unison, nothing on here. I pop those off. This is very important here. In the oscillator restart via gate, you want to always make sure that you check this box. Because if you don't check this box, then your sound may or may not sound the same every time you trigger it. So every note, your sound could sound a little bit different. The only thing about this is if you check this box and then you hear your sound doing something really strange, then check your voicing. Because if you check this box, your voicing, your pitch cutoff could be messing with it. If so, just turn off the pitch cutoff. It's better to have this always on. Restart via gate. Otherwise, you're going to be like, why does my sound different every time I play it? And it's going to be really frustrating. Especially with bass sounds, because sometimes the sub region, the lower region, will cut in and out if you don't have this turned on. So you need to do this. Dimension expander, as always. Quick tip for this on bass sounds. Always have the drive at low and the size kind of high. Don't put the drive at high, you'll get weird stuff, especially if you're also sending reverbs on your sounds. It'll sound horrible. I usually, most always put one of the distortions on here, classic tube, teletube, Bronner tube. I think that's it for the sound. That's what I'm saying. When I'm making this, I'm just clicking random things and making something that I think sounds good, and then I'm putting it in the song. So this is an unreleased song that I will be releasing, I think, as part of like a 5-track EP, something like that. So not for a while, probably. I've got 3 done. I think that is it for making the drop-in logic. Maybe I can take a look at some of the processing, because that makes a really big difference. Exciter, something I discovered recently. If your drops sound like there's not a lot of crispness, if there's not a lot of high-end stuff going on, if it sounds kind of low when you compare it to a reference track, put down the exciter, put it at like 7 to 10%, around 3000 hertz. It's going to add a little bit of crispness to your sounds. Of course, the sausage fattener. But don't always use the sausage fattener, because a lot of times I want to use the sausage fattener, but it doesn't sound as good. So don't force yourself to use the sausage fattener. It ruins some bass sounds and it makes some bass sounds great. But I would definitely recommend getting it. It's only like $30. Come on, guys. It's Christmas. I'm sure someone, Aunt John gave you $30. On a lot of the higher sounds, and I don't mean like leads, I mean like bass sounds that are kind of higher bass. That is not a bass sound, but still holds. I thought that was a bass sound. I'm sorry. I did use it on one of the bass sounds, the spreader, and I would set this. This is a high chord sound. I would set this in kind of, you want the mid-range spread, and just make this between like 8 and 20%. Basically, it just takes a sound and puts it out a little bit into the stereo field, which is very good for your mix. And I use this also when I master. I put this on the master bus, but only like 6% or something. For bass sounds, you're going to want to change this frequency range to a little bit lower. Maybe keep the low end around like 200, and then bring the upper end to like, I don't know, a few thousand. I think that'd be good for bass sounds. Where are my bass sounds? These are down here. What did I do here? Again, like I said, phase distortion, put it on everything. It sounds great. Low cut, 48. I haven't added the sub stuff to this track, which you probably noticed if you have good monitors. So basically all the bass sounds, I'm cutting out the lows at around like 45, 45. And I'm going to add in the sub later. I don't want anything conflicting with the sub, because I have a problem where all of my mixes sound really muddy in the low end. And I'm trying to fix that, so I'm cutting the low end, and I'm going to add that later. Exciter, again, I love it. I love it. That's in Specialized. If you go Specialized, Exciter. Couldn't find it for a long time. Platinum Verb. It's better than Space Designer. It's like, I don't know, it sounds kind of the same as if you're sending this to a reverb. Space Designer just like kills your signal when you put it on. So I don't use that anymore, and I think my mixes sound better because of it. Platinum Verb is good. Low, dry, wet. And you can change the low frequency level. This should probably be lower than it is right now. You don't really want low frequencies in your reverb, so you should take that out. Good. So basically Q. I think I followed this pattern for most of my stuff. Just phase mix indexer. Okay, one thing about the phase distortion. Sometimes you put it on and you'll notice, wow, everything sounds kind of wacky. Let me see if you can notice it here, because it looks like I changed some stuff. I bypass the direction mixer. Bypass phase distortion. Before phase distortion. After phase distortion. Now, please put on headphones, otherwise you're going to be missing this point completely, and it's very important. So this is no phase distortion and no direction mixer. This is with phase distortion. You'll notice that the sound got pushed back and it got pushed out if you're wearing earbuds or headphones. It's really out to the side, and that's not really good for bass sounds. You want those kind of in the middle. So here's the direction mixer. Here's what it sounds like without the direction mixer. And then with. Just moves it back to the middle. Spread 1.0 is where it is when you started, and then you want to bring that in. You want to keep the sound not totally mono, but pretty mono. Especially, I made a sound one time, and then I played it on a mono system, and it sounded horrible. So you want to make sure that everything is kind of not super stereo, because it sounds weird and it'll sound bad when you play it on mono stuff, like your iPhone, if you're just playing it out loud. Or people tell me a lot of club systems are mono. I wouldn't really know, but I believe them. What did I do here? Kind of same thing, because like I said, I just took this sound, duplicated it, changed it a little bit, so I left most of the same processing. I think that's pretty much it. I don't know how long this has been. I hope it hasn't been horribly long. But I think I got some good points in there. So thanks for watching. Subscribe or like or whatever if you learned a little bit of something. I think this has been really good for Logic users. There's not a lot of Logic guys who do really good tutorials. So I hope this was helpful. Merry Christmas.